I'm Helen Faulkner, and I was the sound editor on the Serpent Sword Proof-of-Concept trailer. I'm going to talk to you about the sound design for the trailer. Now, what do we mean when we say sound design? Let's start with a basic rule. When you're watching TV or a film, work under the assumption that, apart from dialogue, nothing you're hearing is real. That is to say that apart from people talking, all sounds have been manually inserted after the piece has been filmed. This is because the microphones that are used on set are specifically designed to only pick up whatever they're being pointed at whilst filtering out extraneous noises, be that wind, traffic, or a fidgeting crew. And the recording device is adjusted to favour voices in order to preserve the clarity of the dialogue. This means that most of the sound detail is lost. Occasionally, the production microphone might pick up a usable sound effect, but this is not a given. This means someone has the job of building a soundscape from scratch. Broadly speaking, in this piece, the sound design has three functions. It adds realism through detail, it adds atmosphere, and it tells the story. These functions frequently cross over. These last two are also aided by the musical score, but for the purposes of this video, I'm only going to talk about sound effects. Realism is a deceptive concept in many ways because much of the time, sound effects can trick you into thinking something is real when it isn't. For example, not to spoil it or anything, this man is not really being kicked. This man is not really being stabbed. And this building isn't really on fire. But if we add in a whoosh and a thud, a nice juicy slicing noise, and a ferocious burning, then we find ourselves believing that what we're seeing is genuine. As such, a fight that has actually been carefully choreographed can sound like a vicious assault. But realism can also apply to smaller, subtler sounds, like a fire crackling in a lord's hall, clinking chainmail, or the gentle rustling of leaves. One of the functions of music is to inform you of the emotion of the scene, and in this trailer, the music is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But sound effects are also at work here, particularly atmospheric sounds. Atmosphere can apply to sounds that go straight through a scene to tell you where you are and what the environment is like. Or individual ambient sounds that add more detail to the story world. Sounds can also assist in telling the story itself. For instance, a terrified scream from the darkness means bad news for Aenflad, and we know that Hesse does not wish to be discovered by whoever is approaching. Sword nerds will tell you that a sword doesn't really make a sound like this when drawn from a leather scabbard. But this is an instance where realism takes a backseat to storytelling and drama. A sound like that tells you one important thing. This blade is sharp. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I add sound effects to a scene. It's not usually as simple as putting on a single sound and moving on. Often I'll want to layer up several sound effects to achieve the desired effect, especially in moments where a lot is happening at once or where a moment needs extra impact. Now, this was a particularly fun moment to work on. On most shots in an assembled picture, it is accompanied by the sound that was recorded on set at the time, which we can use as a guide. But because this is a slow motion shot, it doesn't have that, so we have to use our imaginations a little bit more. Now, this punch has about 11 layers to it, so let's go through each one individually and talk about what function they're serving. As a side note, on a full television show with a full budget, it is normal to take time to record certain effects specifically for the show that match the picture. This is normal for things like footsteps, hand movements, cloth movements, actors interacting with props, etc. We call these Foley effects. However, I did this at home whilst furloughed, so didn't have access to the kind of recording equipment needed for that sort of thing. So everything you're hearing for this piece is from a sound effects library. Also, typically, it's not the kind of thing you'd worry about for a trailer. Firstly, we'll start with the Atmos tracks that go from edge to edge of the shot. There are 2 here, but it's normal to have about 3 or 4, or even more depending on the busyness of the scene. We're outdoors here, so we need a bit of wind. Looking at the environment they're in, it's quite grassy, so we'll start with a dry whistling wind. They also seem to be on a hill and it's very exposed, so a rumbling, blustery wind seems in order. Lovely. Now on to the detail. We'll start with the naturalistic stuff, though because this is a dramatic moment, we'll want to exaggerate it a little. Now, we want a generic punching sound to start off with. That's quite nice, got a bit of cloth rustling, quite a dull thud. I want to add more detail to the moment, so looking at the shot we can see that Bear Brand is quite bloodied up and he even spits blood after getting whumped in the face. So maybe he's lost a tooth or bitten his tongue or something, so if we get something that indicates that... So this is a very wet, squishy, fleshy impact that lets you know that damage has been done. I still want a bit more impact, so I'm going to add another punch in there. There's a bit of a whoosh in there, which, even though this is in slow motion, gives us the impression of speed, so you can tell this is a very fast punch. It's also quite blunt, and there's still a bit of dampness in there too. And just to bring home the fact that this punch is really hard, I'll add one more sudden, hard impact. Beautiful. And because we can use sound effects to draw attention to the details, let's add a nice wet blood splatter as well. Together, they sound like this. Okay, it sounds quite nice like that, but we can add a bit more drama by being more arty and adding some more metaphorical, less literal sounds. So again, just to give the impression of speed, we'll add a bit of a whoosh. Lovely stuff. Next, you can't see it so well in this shot, but in a previous shot of the same fight, the sky looks stormy, so we can incorporate things from the environment to sell this moment. And if you wanted to read into the meaning here, we can say that it signifies Hengist as being a force of nature, much like a thunderstorm. Now, I actually found 2 thunderclaps for this moment and couldn't decide what I liked best, so I thought, why not have them both? And finally, just to really drive it home that this could very well be a finishing blow, we have a low boom. Altogether, these more arty layers sound like this. And added to the stuff from earlier, it all sounds like this. Now this is quite exaggerated because it's a moment of high drama, but a lot of moments are layered in this way to make the sounds richer and more impactful. Now you may be thinking, why does it sound different to how it does in the trailer? This is because, once I put in all of my effects, it moves on to another person called the re-recording mixer, whose job is to gather everything sound related, that is, music, sound effects, and dialogue, and make them all gel with each other to have the maximum emotional impact. This could mean that some of my effects are lowered in volume, or scrapped entirely in places where music would work better, or dialogue needs to be heard clearly. This trailer was kindly mixed by my boss, for which we're extremely grateful. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this look into the sound design for the Serpent Sword Proof-of-Concept.